Has it occurred to you that the systems we live by are not designed to get results? We pay for procedures instead of outcomes, focusing on emergencies rather than preventing disease and living a healthy lifestyle. For over 25 years, I've taken care of Olympians, Paralympians, A-list actors, and Fortune 1000 companies. If I did not get results, they did not get results. I realized that while powerful people who control the system want to keep the status quo, if I were to educate the masses, you would demand change. So I'm taking the gloves off and going after the systems as they are. Join me on my mission to create a new tomorrow as I chat with industry experts, elite athletes, thought leaders, and government officials about how we activate our vision for a better world. We may agree and we may disagree, but I'm not backing down. I'm Ari Gronich, and this is Create a New Tomorrow podcast. Good afternoon. This is Ari Gronich, the performance therapist, and Tim Pedersen, Dadbod Warrior.
Hey, everybody.
We're talking today about COVID-19 and about boosting your immune system naturally, ways to do that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Tim and just kind of give you an idea that Tim is known as the Dadbod Warrior. You could show him your musculars.
Yeah, I'm hiding it today.
I remember you said, the COVID-15 is upon us, and kind of like kids going to school in college and getting that freshman 15. A lot of people are starting to get the COVID-15 of being stuck in home. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to avoid that, how to boost your immune system. And Tim, why don't you tell them a little bit about who you are and why I'm talking to you?
Great. Thanks, Ari. So my name's Tim Pedersen, and I do have a company called Dadbod Warrior. And I'm a certified health coach, and I've been on a lifelong journey of health and fitness. I just didn't really know at what level I would take that journey. And for the past 5 years, I've really focused on doing that. And I grew up in a household where both my mom and dad were really into health and fitness in the sense of trying to figure out if there was a way to help my sister who had a mental disability. And my whole life was, my dad reading Prevention Magazine and Life Extension Magazine and vitamins. And we always used to joke that he would shake like a pill bottle if he jumped up and down because he was always taking vitamins. And, he was one of the first people I ever met who started eating butter again when we were told that butter would kill you. And I'm like, no, you need to eat. I can't believe it's not butter. It tastes just like butter. It's better for you. And, little did I know at the time that it's, one molecule away from eating plastic, and it's doing so much harm to us. So I grew up with that. And as I got older and I was in my late 40s, I realized how important all of this was and how, I was doing marketing, I was doing branding, and that my best superpower was my health. And how do I help other guys who are going through a divorce, who have gone through depression, have kids, or a dad trying to feed their kids, trying to feed themselves, trying to recreate their life. Like all of a sudden I was like, I'm doing this and I'm doing okay. And I've gotten myself out of a lot and I've struggled through a lot. So I felt like I had something that I could offer. And so that's when I got certified as the health coach, because I wanted to take it to another level. I was already a CrossFit coach, and I've been doing CrossFit for 8 years. And so that's kind of where the journey began a long time ago. And then it's just heightened and gotten more and more. And the goal now, you have to have a goal that scares you. And for me, my goal is to help 5 million people in the next 5 years, not only with their overall health, but to also beat or get their type 2 diabetes under control. So it's a big number, and it obviously means talking to your audience and talking to other people's audience and getting on podcasts, doing my own podcast, and doing those things that will broaden the audience, because as you know, Ari, we can control these things. They are part of a lifestyle that we can improve on. And even with what we're dealing with, the COVID virus, there's a lot more in our control than we may realize.
Absolutely. So let's get into the inner control a little bit and what we can do to naturally boost our immune system, what we can do to avoid getting the extremes of the symptoms. We may not be able to avoid getting the virus, right?
Right.
We can avoid getting symptoms, being asymptomatic, and or at least close to it. So let's get into some of those ways, and I'm going to be looking kind of down at both times because we're going to be taking questions as well. So if anyone has any questions for Tim or myself, feel free to post them inside of the chat box, and we'll try to answer them. If not right away, towards the end at least. We'll take a brief Q&A at the very end.
Awesome.
So let's talk about boosting immune system naturally and avoiding the pre-existing conditions that many of the people who are suffering have had. So give me kind of like the first few things, the first 2 or 3 things that you would suggest.
The first thing is eating healthy and eating clean, natural, whole foods. And that's going to be my answer to anything. That's going to be the start and the basis for anything and everything if you want to improve your health and want to gain control of your health. So what's happened for the past 30, 40, 50 years is we have become a society of eating this packaged and processed food. And as that technology increased very rapidly, our bodies take a little bit more time to adapt to those things. And so we're putting things in our body that our body doesn't always know what to do with. And our body is made to protect itself. Our body is made to heal itself, and our body always wants to win. And what it's going to do is, in that protection of itself, it becomes inflamed. That's like one of the first defenses, is that inflammation, because it's sending the warriors to deal with this foreign object that's in your body. So imagine all of your intestines, all of your gut, your whole digestive system is now becoming this battleground for your defenses, because you're putting in something that it doesn't recognize and is not able to break down. I mean, we have synthetic vitamins. We have vitamins that we're taking that are synthetic, and we're not actually able to break them down and use them in the ways that our body needs to, and how we think we're going to be able to. Our food is being fertilized by synthetic fertilizers and non-organic fertilizers. And there's these things that are going in that our body doesn't know how to deal with. And when it doesn't know how to deal with it, when it's in our body, it's getting inflamed. So what happens when our body is constantly in this state of inflammation, like our whole, imagine, how many feet of intestines and things do we have? Imagine that whole part of your body is in battle. All of a sudden you get a cold germ in your system, you're going to get the cold because it's so busy fighting that internal battle that you've already created for it. So how many people do you know that they eat like crap and they're always sick? They're always catching something. Something comes home from school and they're catching it. And the problem with that is that they've created that environment where they can't possibly battle something simple like a cold.
Right. So we could talk about like low level symptom versus high level symptom. But inflammation has been addressed as the #1 first response cycle in any disease, whether it's autoimmune disease or diabetes or even Alzheimer's. They're now saying Alzheimer's is like type 3 diabetes, and it's really related to inflammation in the brain. And then the protective mechanism is to cover up the inflammation, and that's called the plaque that you see in the MRIs. So, getting your body out of inflammation is one of the key areas. Now, you say whole foods, right? But somebody might go and get a thing of bread and it says whole grain on it. So we kind of got to be a little more specific, because a lot of people don't understand. They're eating an apple and it's covered in, say, wax and pesticide, right? And they're thinking, I'm eating a whole food.
Yeah.
But as some, because of runoff and mineral depletion, you need to eat about 8 to 9 apples to equal what one apple would have equaled, right, 50 years ago. So how can people who may not know what whole food is or what it's not, why it's better to eat grass-fed, free-range meats rather than hormone-fed meats that are being still, right? So let's get into the nitty-gritty a little bit more about the details of what is a whole food and what is a whole vitamin versus a synthetic, and why is that so important to know the difference between the two. And I'll give you just a little prelim. I go to the store and I look at the aisles, and the bread aisle is like empty. The canned food aisles are empty. But I go to the meat section and almost all the meat's gone except for the organic, grass-fed, free-range those things. So you can still get all the healthy food you want at the store because that's the only thing left.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about that and why it's so important for boosting the immune system, especially now.
Ari, I knew I loved you for so many reasons, and you have, those are just amazing questions and comments that when I was worried that when you said we were going to talk for an hour, your last one went over an hour. Now I'm thinking we're going to need about 3 hours, Ari. We are definitely kindred spirits. So where do I begin? Where did we begin? So the first thing is, just like the internet, don't read and believe don't believe everything you read on the internet. You can't believe everything you read on a package. And unfortunately, there's huge lobbying companies and systems that are, battling every day to get things passed and them to be able to say certain things that just really aren't true. So I have fallen victim to this as well. I try to buy, the healthiest food for my kids that I can possibly buy. And fortunately, I have kids that are very into it. So what happens when you feed them well and you teach them along the way, they then will point out when you've bought some crap food. So they've been very vocal with that. When I'm in a rush and I buy it, it says natural, it says organic, and I'll buy it, and they'll point out it's got, something that I've basically said is not something allowed in my house and our house. So you can read and see the natural and organic, say on a box of cereal, and I'll read the ingredients, and there's literally 5 different kinds of sugar, which is scary because that's not what we should be giving someone in the morning for breakfast and then sending them off to school. Well, in the olden days, right? And expecting them to have an attention span longer than 5 minutes. And I just remembered going back to that apple. Not only does that apple not have the nutrients that it had 50 years ago, it has about, I don't even know how many times the sugar that an apple did back then. Because what they've done is it's not necessarily genetically modified, but they have grafted and they've done things to create fruits and vegetables that are sweeter, especially fruits that are sweeter. So I remember when I was younger going to Europe and having orange juice, and I guess it's from Israel. The oranges are from Israel, and they're grown completely different than here, and it was so bitter. Now I grew up in Florida, so I know, and you're in Florida, and we know Florida orange juice. That's like sweet, pulpy, amazing. It's it's like candy. It's like liquid candy, and basically it is like the glucose. Is so high in that, and so when I would drink it over there, I just like, what is this stuff? It's bitter, and then I realized years and years later that it has not gone through the same thing over here that we've done to our fruits. So realize that you're not getting the healthy nutrients, and you're getting so much more fructose, sorry, not glucose, fructose, which then turns into glucose. But the fructose is so high in that fruit that we're eating. So even eating that apple is, is problematic. So for me, the first thing that you should do is definitely, fruits and vegetables. If you can go and buy organic vegetables, that's the best thing that you can do. So the first thing on that shopping list is, kale and spinach. Greens are so good for you. Now, when you think of, like say a banana, again, very high in fructose because it's been made to be so sweet, but it's got that peel on it. And if there were pesticides being used, you are peeling that off, and the fruit itself most likely has not had the pesticides or anything else on it. So if you're looking at, my budget and what I can afford, an organic banana is not necessarily that much better. Now for the environment, yes, it's much better to buy organic because it doesn't have all those pesticides and things put on it, and the fertilizers. But for me, kale and spinach, when you think of the surface area on a frilly kale leaf, there's so much surface area. And if it has been sprayed with those pesticides, or even now these herbicides and things that are killing out the other things, there's so much space for that to be held in there. And it's very hard to get that washed off because it is so frilly. Spinach is a little flatter, a little easier, but still that's such a big surface area to be absorbed in.
And
so,
those are pretty much some of the highest sprayed items in a grocery store, right?
Exactly. So, because they're so yummy. If you've ever tried to grow kale, I've not had much luck because there's always something trying to eat it. And I have little caterpillars and little things. And I go out there, and like yesterday, there was 5 plants that were ready to be harvested. And I go out there literally the next day, and they're down to like these stalks, and there's like these big fat happy worms going, thank you. So I'm thinking I probably should be eating the worms at that point because they've gotten all the nutrients.
Yes.
So you want to look for those organic vegetables. And what are the ingredients in, what's the ingredients in kale? Kale. Okay, it's kale. There's nothing else in it. Right. So looking for things, if you are, as you venture farther and further into the store, looking for those items, if they're jarred or canned, that have fewer ingredients. You don't want that list of all these additives and all these things and nutrients and enriched and all these things. You want it to be as pure as possible. And if you can't pronounce it, you probably shouldn't be eating it. And the longer the shelf life, the shorter your life. So that's kind of, you buy, that box of cereal, you can have it in your cupboard for 5 years. Well, it's probably not something you should be eating at any point as well.
I thought that old age, the age limit has risen because of all the preservatives we're eating.
Yeah, that's the way it should be, right?
Is that not true?
Well, I don't think it's working. I really don't think so. It's a good premise. Yeah, it's something that isn't working. So, and then you mentioned, it's funny because we have an Aldi. I don't know if everyone has Aldi, but it's a kind of a discount store, and they do have some good products, and they are moving to non-GMO, and they are moving to organic only, actually. So they're doing some good things. And they sell a keto bread. So I follow a keto lifestyle and a healthy keto. So it's a little different than just like keto.
Clean versus dirty, right?
I'm sorry?
Clean keto versus dirty keto.
Yeah. So I'm more on the clean, and I'll have some sushi. So that might be considered a little dirty. So yeah. White rice is dirty.
I think dirty would be more the bacon in, entire packages at every meal that's filled with the nitrates and so forth.
Yeah. There's people that would like a Diet Coke is technically keto, but is not a healthy option. So the healthy keto is a pure, it's probably even cleaner than clean keto. So that's, I follow that. And so they do have a keto bread, and it's a lot less expensive than the stuff I normally buy. And just like you explained, the bread aisle is empty at Aldi, but there are 2 bins full of the keto bread that I've never seen before because it does get bought up. But now there it was. I'm like, okay, it took a COVID pandemic for me to be able to find the keto bread. So the other thing, when you mentioned the meats, so there is grass-fed But what you have to look for is grass finished. So they will meet the standards of feeding them on grass, but what they'll do right at the end is they'll take them into the feedlot, and for the next, I don't even know the time frame, but they then will still fatten them up on grain. Well, cattle, they're not meant, like grain and especially corn, like those things are not part of their digestive system. Their seven stomach system is meant to process grass, not that. So then you're creating an animal that has inflammation in it, and that's part of our whole system is inflamed animals that are technically and literally sick, and that's what we're eating. So it also has to be grass finished. So that is more expensive. It may be considerably more expensive than a grain and corn fed cow. But like you mentioned, what we're trying, if you look, the reason why we eat is to fuel our body, to fuel this machine that is trying to support us and do what it needs to do, to heal us, to repair us, to, every 7 years, every cell in our body has been regenerated. And so if we look at it like that, now we put all the other stuff on food. Now we put all the emotion, we put all that, oh, you were good, let's go get some ice cream, you made, straight A's, how about a cookie? If you be quiet, I'll give you some Cheerios. Like we have added all that, and I am guilty of it. When you got kids and you need them to be quiet and you're at a funeral service, you start pumping up the cookies and whatever you need to keep them quiet. And so, we've all had that happen. We all have those neural pathways that create that, food is a comfort. But the real reason is we are just fueling our body. Okay, so let's go back to that meat. So now all that's left is hopefully the grass-fed and grass-finished beef, and it's 3 times as much as the other hamburger was. The thing that you need to think about is that that meat is going to be so nutritious for you that you actually don't need to eat as much. And Ari, what's happened to me is I've eaten healthier, I've eaten keto, I eat so much less. And this has happened with my clients too. They're like, I'm saving more money than your actual fees because I don't eat as much as I used to. I'm not as hungry because their body doesn't have the cravings because they are getting the food and nutrients they need.
Right. So we can actually, like I've done keto with intermittent fasting, which is how I lost 140 pounds.
Whew.
And so, this is coming from somebody who's had autoimmune disease for my entire life, pituitary tumor, at least since I was 7, when I was told by doctors I would never lose weight. I would gain weight until I was dead from it. And so, I transitioned into intermittent fasting. I have done fasts my whole career. I've done cleanses my whole career, and they didn't necessarily do much for me other than temporary relief. But when I started doing the keto and with the intermittent fasting, mm-hmm. I may eat 1 or 2 meals a day now. Mm-hmm. Usually I'll be drinking a lot of stuff, like I'm drinking some super blue-green algae right now.
Awesome.
And I had earlier a little bit of collagen, but I don't spend
Speaking my language.
I don't spend the kind of money that you would normally spend. That, and I don't eat as much meat. I'm not craving the meat as much. So I might eat meat 1 or 2 times a week versus every single meal of every single day having a little piece of meat. There's enough other things with protein in it that it's not necessary to eat that. And that's a good way to balance the budget when budget is a concern for eating, a healthy way, right?
Trying to feed a whole family in a healthy way. And it can be daunting. And then, like I said, I've totally fallen into that trap as well. Pop-Tarts can be really cheap. You buy the generic Pop-Tarts and you think, well, there's a couple meals right there and I've only paid $1.98, so it is very enticing, but you've just sent your kids off to school or given them a snack that has just wound them up, and all you've done is create more issues for yourself and the teachers that they have to deal with. now it's just us that has
So let's talk about that with the kids in regards to things like ADD, ADHD, and the diets that we're on that's kind of promoting it. And what were kids like 50 years ago? Because if I look back, and I'm not quite that old, but I'm close enough that I can look back and see, we did a lot of activity. We were always moving. We were always outside and about, getting sunlight, getting vitamin D. We were, yes, I was born in the microwave oven era, right? And Hungry Man dinners and stuff like that. But
and that was the beginning of the downfall. I mean, that was really like when you look at the demographic, the graphs and all the statistics, there was a lot happening then. There was, fat was being taken out of food, sugar was being put in, glyphosate was, being used on crops. Like all these things were happening that like became this perfect storm of, starting to kill us basically, or create the bad environment that we kind of have now.
Right. So let's link it back then to COVID and building immune response so that we, even if get it, are asymptomatic or at least have the low levels of symptoms. What can we, what else can we do for this particular issue at this particular time? And I'm, what can we do for that?
Yeah. And so just to clarify, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist. However, I have been glued to my computers with podcasts and YouTube videos from doctors and researchers, and like all of us have pretty much been doing. So you have your baseline things. You have I call it like the essential oil people who are like, dousing themselves in thieves oil and these things. And I think there is some validity to that. I mean, they do help create an environment that wards off viruses and bacteria and fungus and whatever. So, there's there could be, and if that's your thing, that's great. There's also been some, a little bit of talk around drinking hot fluids to help, when it does get in, if you breathe it in and it gets into your system, like having that wash it down and get it into your digestive system where it would be killed. But it does attach to, there's an ACE2 receptor that it attaches to. Once it attaches to that, that's not going to help. But those first few minutes, like when you first come home, and if you've been exposed to it, there are some doctors that say, there could be some benefit to that. So, I drink a lot of tea. I drink a lot of hot tea. I drink a lot of hot coffee. Is it protecting me? I'm not really sure, but, I enjoy it. So and maybe it's part of the placebo effect that, I'm killing it and my body's like reacting to it. There are more specific things like, they're saying vitamin C and zinc, which for me have always been a frontline defense thing through a cold and flu season. So if you look at it, like what have we been doing for cold and flu? And if you're someone who does not get cold and flu, what are the things that you do that help protect you from that? So they're saying that the zinc is very effective in helping in that. And I guess with like some of these antiviral things that they're trying, the zinc is part of that that cure and that process to help along the way.
Right. So I'll just kind of go to what's been talked about a lot. The hydroxychloroquine is made from quinine, which has been used as an anti-malarial drug for about 400 years before it was a drug. And quinine, its effects is to open up cell walls and allow things to get in and pass through. And then zinc is an antiviral. It's a known antiviral. That's what Z-Pak, in traditional medicine is part of. Zinc is part of a Z-Pak. But so grapeseed extract, and we can kind of put a list together if anybody wants to know more. But grapeseed extract is antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial. Garlic, antifungal, antibacterial.
Oregano oil.
There are so many things, but vitamin D, there's several kinds of vitamin D. D2 is not as absorbable by the body as D3 is, and emulsified D3 is even better. In some places, they're saying that they're recommending 800 IU or international units of vitamin D. However, for a symptomatic approach, it's better about 10,000 IU of vitamin D. Now, here's the funny thing. If you go out in the sunlight as naked as you can be, right, for 15 to 20 minutes, you're going to get 10,000 IU of vitamin D from the sun.
And don't get your mail or take your trash out while doing that, because there are some stories where that's been a problem. So
we don't want to have any of those stories, but just as a way of thinking about it. So if you're isolated in your house, socially isolating, and you're not getting out into the sun for at least 15 to 20 minutes a day, you're really helping to compromise your immune system versus helping to enhance it, right?
Exactly. So back in the pandemic flu of, was it 1918 through 20, what they were doing was bringing patients, they were setting up these camps. Basically, they would bring the patients out into the sun, and like that was helping them tremendously. So I mean, there is, I don't know if you call that scientific or anecdotal, but that's part of, and can be part of the process of helping your body be able to defend these things. So mushrooms are another one. Mushrooms are great for the immune system. They help build the immune system, and so there's a couple of those: shiitake, maitake, reishi, lion's mane, chaga. There's some amazing ones. Cordyceps. All of those are great immune builders. I take a mushroom powder that's a mix of all of those, and it's just a great immune system. And I've, between everything that I've done, I've not, knock on wood, I've not had a cold, flu, stomach virus, anything in 2 years. And meanwhile, I've had flu in my house. I've had my kids, coming in. I don't control everything they eat. They have 50% of their time, at their mom's house. And I have 2 older kids that are at one's now graduated from college, one is in college. So they're exposed to a lot of different things, and that has come into my house. And part of me is thinking, oh crap, I'm exposed to this, I'm going to get it. But fortunately, with what I've been doing, somehow I've not. Every year I used to have allergies act up, and I would get it would end up being a bronchitis or some other lung thing. And I've not had that either. So not even the allergies bothering me. And for my thought process is I've reduced the inflammation in my body to the point that the allergies that I normally would have, my body is able to defend itself against those things that normally bother it. So there's that. And that, again, that's anecdotal for what has worked for me.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about, the main thing that I think is key for all of this is that microbiome. And you know a lot about it, and we're hearing more and more about it. And we think about it, 10 years ago, no one was talking about gut health. Very little. I mean, we knew a little bit about, yogurt's good for you. It's got these natural enzymes in it. You should be eating yogurt. The only problem was there was so much freaking sugar in it that it was really not doing you any benefit. But we're finding more and more like that there's even a microbiome on our brain and in our brain and every part of our body. And when you look at the numbers, there's 10,000 different species of this microbiome, of this bacteria in our body. And most of it is like 99% of it is actually helping us out. It's a symbiotic relationship. There is that, that 1% though, that is trying to kill us. So, or they're not benefiting us. And it depends how you're feeding that. If you look at it like a garden, you can have a garden full of amazing things and food and the kale and the spinach, whatever, or it can be full of weeds. And, what is in that gut? What are you feeding your gut? And if you're eating a lot of sugar, you're eating a lot of, a lot of pastas and white processed food, that's feeding a different kind of microbiome and gut bacteria that might actually be benefiting you.
Right.
And there are now studies that show that the bacteria that's feeding off that sugar can actually send signals to your brain telling you that it needs more sugar. So when you think that you're, like something has control of my body, I can't stop eating sugar. Well, one, it's like it's like a cocaine response, like you have that aspect, but then you also have this alien in your body saying, feed me sugar. So you really got, you really do have aliens telling you and guiding what you eat and kind of forcing you to put that cake in your mouth. So cleaning up that whole biosystem, which doesn't happen overnight, is huge in helping the immune system. And Ari, I know you have a lot to add to that.
Yeah. So, with the microbiome, there's more of them than there are of us, meaning there's more cells, more trillions of genes than there are of us. I think it's like 3 trillion genes out of the 10,000 different species of bacteria in our gut. Now, here's an interesting thing. One, antibiotics wipe out your gut biome. And if you then start eating food that's more processed, more pesticide rich, then the bacteria that grows in your gut is going to be the kind that cause inflammation because they're upset. They're going to cause bloating. They're going to cause gas. They're going to cause your body to reject the food. So you're not going to absorb as much of the nutrients as good, which means that you're going to be inflamed, not getting nutrients, causing your immune system to drop even further.
Exactly.
That's a big issue. The other thing that they've found is that this gut-brain connection, there's actually a pathway that they've found from the gut to the brain. They didn't know it was there until about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, that they discovered this pathway. And the pathway from gut-brain connection basically says, if you are a sugar addicted person, right, and you walk by donuts, you don't have to even smell them. If you just see them, the gut bacteria will say, I want those, right? And compel you to go and eat them, even if you know it's not something that you want or it's good for you, right? And so, here's a way to get off the hook a little bit for those of us that are sugar eaters. And I'm not one of them, thank God. I never really got into high sugar foods, although corn syrup is in everything, high fructose corn, like these high sugars are in so many things now.
Yeah.
But for those of you who are, it's not necessarily your fault that you're choosing that path, because you're not actually the one choosing it. It's the gut bacteria that's choosing it. And it's your job for a certain amount of time when you're in that detoxification phase to say, no, I'm not going to eat that sugar. And eventually what happens is, like, I can't even drink orange juice anymore or apple juice. It's too sweet.
Yeah.
If I have apple juice, like, I'd have to put this much apple juice and that much water in order to make it not, it's still sweet for me.
Right. Exactly.
Not sweet, right? Because, and most people, they'll drink straight apple juice and it's not too sweet for them because of this microbiome that's affecting that's affecting what your brain is telling you as far as sensory.
Right.
And so that's a kind of interesting dichotomy, is it's not necessarily you.
Right. And there may be comfort in that, or that may scare the crap out of some people. So, but it's an eye opener. Yeah. And so, so what I like to do, Ari, and I think hopefully we mentioned the COVID-15. And so now anyone listening to this is now aware there are aliens in their body telling them to eat that cupcake, or when they smell the cookies, you go, when we used to be able to go to the mall, you'd pass by, those cinnamon buns, oh my God, does that smell good? And I don't eat sugar, but man, you want those things because they smell so damn good. So what are some things that you can do? And for me, what I tell and work with my clients on is finding alternatives for those things. So if they're looking for something sweet, try something salty. A lot of times you actually can have a deficiency in the salt. And we've taken a lot of salt out of food, but if you're eating good, like Himalayan salt, and there's, you know, some natural salts, not the iodized Morton with the umbrella salt. The iodine used in that is such a low quality. It actually doesn't, you know, a lot of studies are showing that it doesn't even help us. And it's a different molecular structure that's
Right.
not the right iodine that we need for our bodies. But hey, they can say it's iodized, and someone thinks that, you know, just like Volvo doesn't say that they're a safe car anymore, but we all have been, you know, have that in our brain that it's the safest car on the road, and there it is. Well, at one point it was the right iodine, now it's not, it's cheaper and whatever.
Well,
So Himalayan salt.
I'll give a little bit about that. The iodized salt was because people were iodine deficient,
Yeah.
and it wasn't working. And that particular kind of salt, iodized salt, table salt, has about 30 some odd % silica or glass. And the silica, when you eat it, starts slicing away at arteries and so on. It cuts. And then cholesterol comes in order to repair those areas. And now all of a sudden you have cholesterol buildup.
Right.
It's not
scar tissue, right.
It's the salt's fault, and it's the kind of salt because of the glass content in it. It's very sharp. The other part of that is they started to give, because if you know anything about cows and livestock, they have what's called a salt lick. And they need the salt lick in order to get hydrated and remain hydrated. And so they started giving the iodized salt to the cows back in the 70s-ish, 60s, 70s. And what would happen is the ankles would swell. Now, don't tell me if you're one of the people who have their ankles swelling, okay? But if you're eating a lot of salt and your ankles are swollen, you might have something that correlates, okay? But their ankles would swell, they would begin to sweat massively, and they became very, very, very sick. And so they had to start giving that salt lick back to the cows in natural rock salt. They decided, well, we can't let our innovation go to waste, so let's just give it to humans. Let's give it to people and put it on the table, because table salt's important. We need to have table salt, and you need iodine, by the way. So
there we go. There it is.
And iodine is a natural antiviral. It's been used for over 100 years in India for malaria. But it's
just not the kind in your salt.
Gotta be the good kind of iodine.
Right. So we've gotten away from that. We've taken the fat out. We've taken the salt out. So the perfect snack for me, especially in the evening, is salted nuts. You've got the fat, and you've got the salt, you've got the crunch. And if you're having that sweet craving, you want something crunchy, you want potato chips, you want, you know, some cookies, having those nuts will save you. And that has worked for all of my clients across the board, something to snack on. And the fat in it helps you feel full. That's another problem with the obesity issue that we've had. We've taken all the fat out of everything. That was made into the culprit. Sugar was added because everything tasted like crap, because the fat adds taste to it. And now we're not getting filled up. We're having extra sugar, and we're eating more of it because we're not filled up, and we're craving more and more. So it's just like, it's a spiral that we have, and you know, the hamster wheel. We're just going and eating. And nothing that we're eating is, one, satisfying us on a nutrient level. It's giving us all the wrong triggers. It's growing the wrong microbiome. So, you know, at some point you just have to say stop. And it's simply as, you know, and I'm sorry if I'll offend somebody. It's like, it's as simple as, you know, grabbing your nuts. Just grab your nuts, guys. Just grab grab the pecans, grab the almonds, walnuts. They're amazing. And I do candied nuts. And what I do is, it's no sugar. I use something called monk fruit, and it's used monk fruit. If you buy, a pack of it, it usually does have erythritol, which is another natural sweetener. It's not a sugar substitute. It's not like sucralose or aspartame or whatever's in Equal. It's a natural sweetener. It does not create an insulin response, which is what you're trying to avoid. You don't want your insulin to spike and all that. So I use so here's the recipe, guys. It's amazing. So you take an egg, and you just use the egg white, and you whip it up. So you just take, and now you're getting exercise. So now you whip that up, and you take a couple cups of pecans and walnuts, whichever ones are your favorite. The walnuts tend to be a little cheaper right now, so you put that in so it coats it. Then you put in about half a cup of the monk fruit, which you can order on Amazon. You can get it at Whole Foods. If you have a food co-op, a lot of times they have it. And then salt, and I would say a couple tablespoons of salt in there, and some cinnamon. You roast that in the oven for, I think, about 15 minutes. Just keep an eye on it so it doesn't burn. One, the house is going to smell amazing. You're going to smell like one of those candied pecan things, those little carts that you go by in the city. They smell amazing. And then you've got these blocks of these candied nuts that are a perfect TV snack, in the middle of the day snack. They give that sweetness. They got the salt, and there's the fat in them that will help fill you up. So that's my ultimate tip for you, and the recipe. I can be more specific in it. I can give Ari the full recipe if anyone's interested. But
yeah, you can post it in the link. I just want to answer somebody's comment real quick.
Sure.
Somebody said that going out in the sun and avoiding sugar is not going to give you immunity from the coronavirus. Nobody ever said it's going to give you immunity. It's going to boost your immune system. And that is going to help with symptoms of the coronavirus. So don't get what we're saying wrong. We're talking about naturally boosting the immune system. We're not talking about creating an immunity. The only way to create an immunity is to get the virus,
right,
develop the antibodies. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. Get the virus, develop the antibodies. If you got the virus and you have a really healthy immune system, you're going to be less symptomatic than somebody who's got pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
That's what we've been talking about. So
yeah, all we're talking about is all the things that you can do to help build your, absolutely, to build your immune system. We're not trying to say we have the cure for at all. And there's either one of us could already have it, and because we have an immune system that's able to fight. Listen, guys, all of us have cancer. Every single one of you listening, Ari, we all have cancer. There is cancer inside our body. And what happens, it takes hold when we have and create an environment in our body that our immune system can't battle that cancer, and it takes over. But you have cancer in your body right now. You may have COVID in your body right now, and your body is fighting it off. You don't know that. But the idea for this conversation is that we talk about how to build that immune system up that you can fight these things. And that is overall, will that help us in the next pandemic? Hopefully. It's not, as you said, it's not a cure for the actual thing. It's a way for our body to be able to fight these things when they come in.
Right, exactly. And I just want to, there's a study that was done in Germany. They tested the population of this town for COVID. And they found that over 15% of the population had COVID. None of them were symptomatic. None of them had experienced any symptoms of the illness whatsoever. And so that's really more the issue is, can we get these things? Because we can't avoid life, right? We're not going to avoid bacteria. We're not going to avoid viruses. We're not going to avoid getting parasites and so on and so forth. When we get them, how can we develop an immune system that's strong enough to do its job, which is to fight off those things, that has enough nutrients in our system, that we have enough of the things that make up. And sugar happens to be something that blocks your immune system, it causes inflammation, especially in the quantities that we tend to put it in processed foods. And same thing with going out in the sun, boosts your vitamin D amazingly well. Vitamin D isn't in and of itself an immunity to a virus. It's just something that helps your immune system become more strong and able to protect you from these kinds of responses. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're clear. Nobody's talking about creating an immunity, because the only immunity is to get the virus and fight it off and develop the antibodies.
Yeah.
Or
that was a great question, Quentin. Thanks for posting that and letting us give the opportunity to clarify that.
you know, I appreciate, my thing is I love to have the discussion. I love to have the conversation, because without the conversation, we can't get to a truth. And you and I can have very diverse opinions about something. And the more we talk and the more we go through the debating process, the more we can come to a truth and an understanding of each other, whether we believe each other or not. So,
and listen, guys, this is what we have to think about. You know, a lot of states. So I'm in North Carolina. Ari, you're in Florida, and in between us is Georgia, and Georgia is talking about opening things up. Gyms and bowling alleys and all these things that are essential. Now, I can understand a gym being essential. I'm going crazy, but I'm not. If it opened up next week and it's right up the road from me, I don't think I would be going in there. And they're also saying that, next winter, this same exact COVID, well, not exact, because this thing is, what's scary about it is that there's already it's up. Last I checked, and this was a couple weeks ago, it was up to C. They had version A, B, and C. Like, it is mutating, and it's a very smart virus. So who knows what we're going to be faced with. Like the flu, every season it's a little bit different. It's not the same flu over and over again. So this is going to be this may become part of our life. I don't know. So all we can do, and there's a level of feeling hopeless through all this. Like, what the hell can we do? I'm sitting at home. There's nothing that I can do. Yes, there is. Build up that immune system. Don't stress yourself out about something that you don't have any control over. Get sleep. Just create that environment in your body that it can fight these things. And I feel so bad for these healthcare workers, because they are being stressed out. They're being overworked. They're not getting sleep. And they are getting this because they're strong, healthy people, but we're putting them in a situation, not only facing that COVID and the virus, but we're reducing their immune responsibility in their body to the point that they're getting this and having issues with it. So do what you can.
That the food that they serve inside the hospitals is jellos and ice creams and things like that, and it just kind of, and vending machines with lack of healthier food for the doctors, for the people who are the healthcare workers. My son's godmother is an ER nurse, has been she's now the charge nurse in our local hospital. And, she says that sometimes when she's on shift, she doesn't even have time to grab a glass of water.
Yeah. It's horrible. Yeah.
We need to really fix part of the system that's making our healthcare workers have to fight so hard just to be healthy themselves. I used to work at Good Samaritan Hospital, and I would work on all the doctors and nurses and staff. And I was their corporate wellness person. And they were still at that time on 30-hour shifts. And if you were on your 28th hour and you were a surgeon and you got called into an emergency surgery, you may have been on your shift now 40 plus hours or more. So, there is definitely a shift that needs to happen within the healthcare industry and the system in which we've created. And that's one of the issues that I like to talk about with you a little bit more, is just, how can we, as a community, what can we do to help support the shift of the system. And the community I'm saying is we're the alternative healthcare industry, although I kind of bridge the gaps between the two sides a lot in what I do. And I've been working diligently to kind of develop a plan on how to do that. But what are some basic things that we can do to make sure that our healthcare workers are really getting the care they need? And that being said, making sure that the system isn't overrunning them. Like I was watching Z-Dog MD, and I don't agree with everything he says, and I agree with some of the things he says. But what he did say in this one video is, we're finding out, because we're not doing all of the elective procedures, how much we're actually taking people's lives, because the medical death toll has dropped significantly.
Wow.
And he, you know, it was an interesting comment, but he said, when this all flushes out, we'll really start to be able to study how our medical system and over treatments have been causing more damage than they've helped. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, first, hats off to our healthcare workers, especially right now, because they are on the front lines in the battleground, however, you know, whatever phrase you want to use. And if you have a chronic issue, if you need surgery, you have cancer, that is like the first, like, yes, that's where I'm going. But you know, my feeling is that it's not really a healthcare system, it's a medical or medicine care system. You know, they are trained in medicine, and they know so much, you know, with chemistry and how these things work, and all the different medicines that are constantly coming out, and all the side effects. I mean, the side effects for what most medicines do are longer than the things that they're helping. And you know, it's a quagmire. It's how can anyone, you know, I guess now they're using the computers to help with all that, but they still have to have a baseline knowledge of how these things are all working together. And you know, my feeling with my clients, I do work with a lot of people that have type 2 diabetes, or they have health issues, and that's why they're like, okay, enough. And I work with their doctor. I've got them going back to their doctor, as you know, every 3 months, just to check and see how everything's going. And the doctor is the one saying, you know, you can come off of that medication, you don't need it anymore. And you know, those are the things that I love to hear, how someone like myself, who is not medically trained, but I'm just using health, and I'm only coaching on a health level of things that they can try and that they can do and they can eat, that are going to help them. You know, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a dietitian, and I'm not a doctor, but it's just so much of it is like, the basis of it is just common sense, and it's unlearning all the commercials from when we were a kid. You know, that picture of that nutritious breakfast, nothing in that. The most nutritious thing was probably the plate. If you ate the plate, that was probably more nutritious than anything else in that picture. So unlearning that stuff, like, you have to, like, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. No, it's not. It's not. You can skip breakfast. You can do intermittent fasting like you do. And guess what? Your body knows how to deal with that. And you know, the best time for breakfast for dinner. That's when, you know, I love to have eggs, and even, you know, healthy bacon, and all those things are great in the evening. You don't have to have them. So those are all those things that we've learned and we've had ingrained in us, that, you know, that sandwich is a great, you know, healthy way to eat. And, you know, a sandwich, again, it's not necessarily, there's so much Roundup in our production of food these days that's causing issues, because that's actually killing our microbiome.
It's also a hormone disruptor.
It actually can stop the serotonin production. So now you've got people that are depressed. Like, look at our rates of depression. Look at what's happening with that. Again, I'm not a scientist, but there are studies that are finding a correlation between that and autism. There are so many things out there saying, you know, they're trying so hard to find that, but they are finding, like, as that increased, so did autism. Well, a lot of other things increased at that point too. So did sugar, taking out fats, you know, there's so many dietary changes. So the answer to all of that is just going back to clean, basic, one one ingredient food. In the potato is a potato, and kale is kale. In beef, there should just be beef. It doesn't need all this other stuff in there. And going to your farmer's market. So how can you get back at the system, or how can you start letting the system know, is buying local, going to your farmers markets, or your actual farmers. They have these boxes that you can get, and now we're going into the production of that. It's farmers will bring you a box of stuff. They're actually finding studies that show I guess they're doing some historical research that shows the microbiome actually used to change with the seasons, because people ate what was available, and their microbiome would change constantly. So I was listening to a podcast today. He's actually this billionaire guy who has funded a company called, I'm bringing it up now, a company called Biome, and VIOME, and they do a microbiome testing. And they will actually, you send in a sample of something, from the back door, and they will test and tell you all about what your microbiome is made up of. And they stay with you because what they want you to do is to get tested regularly, because it's supposed to change. It is supposed to change. It's not supposed to be like me staying on keto for the rest of my life may not best serve me. And it definitely is not necessarily, there's biodiversity. Everyone is different. So how you ate, Ari, is going to may not work for me. All my clients, I work with them in a way that will help them, with how their system works, and we test that out. So they work with you at knowing where your biome is now and where you should take it. So know that, just because you're eating healthy now and all of a sudden something changes, you gain weight, you don't feel good, you're tired, sometimes you need to change up and look at what is available that season. So maybe you need to kind of look at seasonally what is available and change how you're doing. So if you're supporting those local farmers, you're eating more healthy, you're not buying the processed food, my hope and my goal is those things start fading away.
Absolutely. So, and my recommendation to everybody, because as a trained functional medicine consultant, we always used to say, test, test, test. Otherwise, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard. And, for me, I'm gluten intolerant and nightshade intolerant, which a lot of people are nightshade intolerant, or at least they might have an immune response to nightshades. So like peanuts are lentils, which are nightshades. They're poisonous. They have a low level immune response to most everybody, and a high level immune response to a few, right? So I just don't eat them. I don't eat hummus anymore. One of my favorite things to eat.
Oh man.
Gonzo beans, none of those things. But I was tested. I went and had a DNA test. I had blood test. I had saliva test. I had stool test, urine test. I got tested and found out what is good for me and what's not. And so, along with what you're saying, I suggest everybody get tested for what's good for them. And the benefit is that nowadays you can actually get those tests. 5-10 years ago, it was almost impossible to get them. They weren't readily available. Nobody knew about them. But nowadays it's much more prolific, and you're able to get those tests. So,
the prices are coming down. Like, I had first heard about this test actually from Deepak Chopra. He was a speaker at a conference that I went to, and he's like the world-renowned integrative medicine expert. And he talked about this, and I think back then it was like $359. It's now $149. So it's not cheap, but to just understand where you are and have that baseline, and to do it, maybe yearly, or I think they talk about doing something every 6 months, and they have like an app that helps you as well. It's amazing. And to know that you have that help. And the thing that's interesting, Ari, is, again, I'm very cost conscious. I know a lot of families are, again, I work with divorced dads, so sometimes they are they're in a very tight situation and they're trying to figure things out. What's interesting is a lot of my clients, they end up saving money on food because they're not buying, so much stuff. They're able to get the nutrients they need. And if they were on medications, they're saving hundreds and hundreds of dollars on medication. Even stuff, it was still covered by insurance, but they still had co-pays, and some of it still had, $100 a month here, $50 a month. All of a sudden, it adds up. And they're also going to the doctor less for, issues. They are still going, regularly, whether we have them on a 3-month or 6-month or whatever plan, but they're not going every month because this is happening. And now I've got this symptom and now I'm dizzy. All of those things are fading away. And it creates a situation where, again, your body is able to deal with things. You're not going to the doctor because you have flu. You're not going because your kids have stomach viruses. Like, they're able to ward off and fend off those things because the immune system is stronger and can. And
Right.
again, that takes us back to COVID and being able to help our body be able to fight it if it is faced with it somewhere along the line.
And along the lines of what you're saying, just the time factor, the focus, like how much does not being focused because you're dealing with a disease cost you in business? And if you're a corporation, I'm going to repeat that, because your employees are lacking productivity because they have other things on their mind, like their health and wellness and stress and so on. So for a corporation to take care of some of that stuff for their employees is extremely beneficial for the corporation.
Yeah.
Corporations will gain so much money from productivity based on the amount they spend to help their employees' wellness. It's incredible. Robert asked, where can we get those tests? And so if you'd like to, you can put a link into the chat at one point. I will also put a link, but most of what I say to that is go to your local functional medicine doctor, and they will be able to give you the test and read them, because it's really important that you have, somebody who knows what they're doing, read your blood tests, read your allergy tests, read what foods and things are not good in the DNA tests. Otherwise, again, you're looking at, throwing darts on a dartboard. I had
Right.
a client who had all the tests done from their doctor, but was a traditional medical doctor using pathological blood versus functional blood results and numbers. And there is a little bit of a difference. I'm not going to go too much into it, but she completely missed the fact that he was dying of liver disease because his numbers didn't all go into the functional zone. They were fine in the pathological zone. They were on the edges of good or bad in the pathological zone. And just as a quick thing, pathological versus functional blood test, there's a bell curve of about 95% of the population, and they take the average, and then that's how they get their numbers. So you see high or low in numbers, that's where they want you. Testosterone, for instance, is like 200 to 1100, and that's the pathological number. But if you're at 200 or 300 or even 400, you're probably having a low libido, you're having other issues. If you're at the too high of a range, you're getting rage issues and acne issues and bald, issues and those kinds of things. 600 to 800 is kind of like the optimal or functional range. And so you want to have somebody who knows how to read those in a functional range so that you can optimize your body versus being at the highs or lows of any given thing. And that works the same for diabetes. It works the same for, thyroid conditions. It works the same for everything. So
right. That's awesome information, Ari. Thank you. That's great.
Some of the links, to the test. Tim will put in the link to the Zyome. Is that what it's called? Viome.
Viome, yeah.
And that way you can have them. But that is really a great addition to the conversation, because not eating things that are genetically and in your body causing an inflammation response or an inflammatory response is going to, by its nature, boost your immune system as well, fighting off the symptoms of COVID. which is what we're kind of talking about. And I really appreciate, Tim, that we're having this conversation. It's going around kind of a, you know, in a roundabout way, because we're talking about COVID, but we're really just talking about boosting health naturally, and exercise, nutrition, getting out in the sun, taking supplements that are high quality, and really breathing deep, you know, getting enough oxygen and carbon and so forth for your lungs to be able to function into your diaphragm and out. Those are all really amazing ways to naturally boost your immune system, calm down your nervous system and stress responses, cut cortisol levels, boost HGH, which increases sleep, right? So
it's amazing
chain.
once you start that, like what those benefits are. And again, that's what I love about, you know, working and doing what I do, is that it does become this this response, like this chain response, like these things keep happening there. And my clients are more and more amazed, like, wow, I feel great, and I'm not hungry, and I'm losing weight, and like I'm sleeping better. Like all these things keep happening, and it's amazing. Your body does want to help you out. And again, guys, you know, everyone watching, this probably will not be the last time we're faced with something like this. You know, I've always heard like you know, it's going to be the quote unquote common cold that takes us all out. And here we are. This is something that's, you know, more cold-like in our lungs, and look what it's done to us. And we never, like, no one in a million years, or at least in our lifetimes, would have ever anticipated something like this, where we've completely shut down, we're completely quarantined in our own homes. Like this is, and it's worldwide.
Right.
You know, we live on the East Coast, so we've dealt with hurricanes and we've dealt with localized issues, and you know, we get flooded out, and like no one understands what we're dealing with, because they didn't deal with the hurricane, or someone has a tornado. No one else understands it, but like the whole world is going through this, and it's like so odd that that's happening, and that we all can experience that. You know, good and bad. There's a lot of there is some positive coming out of it as well, which is amazing to see people, you know, get that mindset.
Absolutely.
So,
and I just want to go to one other thing that you mentioned earlier, and that's the benefits of fat. So there used to be a time when athletes would carb load. Some athletes still focus on that old belief system of carb loading. What we found in sports medicine is fat loading is better. Fat loading, actually, the energy from fat takes longer to digest, so it lasts longer, right? But it also feeds your brain, because your brain is built of fat and cholesterol. That's the majority of what your brain is made out of. And when we cut the fat out of our diets, we literally are cutting our brain function and our ability to think, cognition, critical thinking. All those things kind of go out of the wayside because your brain is being starved of fat.
absolutely.
What that does for your immune system is it deregulates the hormones that stop your immune, or that make your immune system work correctly and efficiently. And so if your hormones are deregulated because you're not eating enough good fats, I'm going to preface it with good fats, not, you know, highly trans fats and things like that, but good fats. If you're eating plenty of those, in exercise, you'll last longer, you'll recover faster, and you'll be more focused. You'll be able to think faster and think longer and harder. And that is going to help your hormone function, your serotonin function, dopamine function, and upregulate your immune system, helping to fight off corona or any other kind of disease that may come your way. And so with that, do you have any final words? How can people get a hold of you if they are interested in talking to you further?
Call me. Yeah, so I am on Instagram at Dadbod Warrior, if you're one of those IGers. I'm on Facebook at Dadbod Warrior. And so I know branding. So my website is dadbodwarrior.com. So any of those places will find me. Tim at dadbodwarrior.com is also a way to find me via email. So yeah, if you have any questions, any comments, love to hear it. And then just to follow up with what Ari was saying, I do Spartan races and I do CrossFit. And the Spartan races, the most I've done was a 15 miler, and I did not carb load. And I took peanut butter and almond butter with me, and that's what I was sucking down as I did the race. I did realize that you need a lot of water when you're dry mouth and you're putting almond butter in your mouth. It just becomes like, so that was a real learning curve there. But yeah, you don't need those carbs to function. Your body. So think about this, Ari. There is no essential carb. Our body knows how to make carbs. Our body can make the carbs that it needs. There is no such thing as an essential carb. There are essential fatty acids. There's other essential things, but there's no essential carb. Our body can make what it needs. Now, that kind of lends itself to keto. Is keto right for everybody? It's not. Getting these tests and trying it out and seeing if it works for you. Maybe it's something you do a few months a year. It can change for everybody. But just be aware, we don't need to be eating the amount of carbs that we're eating, and if at all. So I'll leave it with that. And this has been amazing, Ari. I think we should do this often. I've had fun, and your expertise and wisdom is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you so much for coming on. I know this was, a last minute thing, so I appreciate you being available and scheduling it. And I enjoyed the conversation because, like I said, we can agree and disagree on many things. And at the end of the day, the conversation is what gets us more to the truth. And that to me is more important than the media spin. So if you'd like,
no media spin here, right?
If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can reach me at achievehealthusa.com, on Facebook, Ari Gronich, Instagram, Ari Gronich, LinkedIn, Ari Gronich. And if you'd like to know more about how you may be able to activate yourself to become a warrior, as Tim has, for whatever your passion is, then a new tomorrow, and I'll put a link inside of the box, the chat box for that. But a new tomorrow, activating your vision for a better world. How can we as a community come together and create the world we want to live in? One of my favorite sayings is, we made this shit all up and we can make it up however we want. So don't have to accept it for what it is. We can create it differently because we made it up to begin with. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much. And I hope to hear from you guys soon. If there's any other questions, we'll be available to answer them on the comment bar.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. I appreciate all you do to create a new tomorrow for yourself and those around you. If you'd like to take this information further and are interested in joining a community of like-minded people who are all passionate about activating their vision for a better world, go to the website createanewtomorrow.com and find out how you can be part of making a bigger difference. I have a gift for you just for checking it out, and look forward to seeing you take the leap and joining our private paid mastermind community. Until then, see you on the next episode.